Welcome to Sachs Realty's Tuesday Night Podcast, where we talk about anything and everything real estate. Each week, we deliver expert information enabling you to make better informed decisions while keeping more money in your pocket. If you're interested in real estate, this is your show. Hey guys, welcome to our Tuesday Night Live, and you got me tonight. How about that? No guests. I'm hoping that some of you log on and come on the show. That's what we want tonight. We're talking about 10 of the most costliest mistakes that we've seen home buyers make over the last 4 years. Now, I want to first turn to an article that NAR, National Association of Realtors, actually referenced this article in one of their publications. And, you know, it's hard to, the way they do these studies and trying to come up with accuracy in reporting, and very little do I believe when I hear things come out of NAR as far as statistics and things like that. I know it's terrible to say, but it's just the truth, because I look at the way that they cover home sales, median home prices, average, home prices across the country. We know over the last several years, people with money have been buying these houses, and they've been buying more expensive houses. And this is given the illusion that home prices have just gone up across the board. And we're still putting a lot of pressure on our home buyers, and home buyers have been kicked to the curb so much over the last 4 or 5 years. But we're going to go over some things tonight. We're going to talk about some of the costly mistakes that we see buyers make, or that we've seen them make in the past. And we're going to try and avoid some of those mistakes today moving forward. But let's get to this report. This was published earlier in the spring, but still very accurate in my opinion as far as the sentiments. In fact, we've seen home sales actually decline since this report. And it's very quiet. It's quiet across the country. It's quiet here in Maryland. We are still seeing activity, but we've seen a lot of actual homes that were on the market go off of the market because the sellers just weren't happy. They were sitting for longer, and we've now hit inventory levels that we haven't seen since like 2019. So we do see a big shift, a big change happening. But let's kind of go over this American Homebuyer Report 2024 edition. We're not going to read the whole thing. I just highlighted a couple things I want to point out. But it says that 50% of upcoming buyers would consider foregoing an agent entirely because of recent changes that will require them to pay their own agent commission. And we're sort of, I want to start off with just talking about the lawsuit. We have seen so many buyers panicked about, this commission lawsuit. First of all, I want to get this out of the way. Yes, it was a new rule, the NAR, where they settled with the courts and the DOJ. It has not been signed officially. I think it's in November, but mid-August, all across the country, home buyers now have to sign contracts for agents to show them houses, at least if the agent's representing the buyer. This has been in our state for a long time, but a lot of states never had to have contracts signed with buyers. And a lot of the buyers are freaked out by it because most of the time, if they're calling Zillow or Realtor.com and they want to see a house, they don't even know the agent that they're meeting at the front porch of this house. So they're seeing the house for the first time, their agent for an agent for the first time, and an agent shoving a document in front of them, asking them to sign it, saying that they're going to agree to pay X amount percent or a fee for them to buy a home. And if you tuned in last week, one of my broker associate, he's a friend down in Florida, him and I had a little debate where he was actually now charging buyers a fee to go see any houses. So I want to get this out of the way. Buyers, this is something that you're going to have to get familiar with. And this report is saying that 50% of these buyers that were interviewed or took this poll, this study, say that they would consider foregoing an agent altogether if they had to pay their commission. We are still seeing sellers offering commission through the broker, their listing broker. I haven't personally seen much change in that. I haven't seen any buyers paying for their commissions lately, and I haven't seen any deals falling apart because of this. But I will tell you, here at Sachs Realty, we made a decision. If you're in Maryland and you're a buyer and you sign on for us to represent you, and the seller is not offering to pay the commission, the buyer broker commission, either through the listing brokerage or by their contribution, the seller's contribution, we're not going to charge our buyers. We're going to do it for $1. We're still working out the fine details. But if you're in Maryland and you're concerned about paying a commission and that preventing you from buying a house, we're going to set that straight. We're not going to put you ourselves in front of you buying a house. But let's go through some of these stats in this article, because this is really the most disturbing part and what we want to talk about tonight and help you to prevent making some of these mistakes. As far as home prices, it says that upcoming buyers plan to purchase a home that costs $483,490 on average, but 52% of Americans who purchased a home since 2023 spent $500,000. I don't know where they came up with this 483,000 figure, but I do know that the economy's in pretty bad shape right now. I expect fully that home prices are going to continue to drop. Unlike what you're hearing in mainstream media, we know that two things are a fact right now. Home prices have exceeded affordability, especially with what people are making. So one of two things have to happen. Home prices have to come down significantly for most of our buyers to be able to afford to buy a house, or wages and salaries need to go up significantly, which I don't really think. I mean, talk to your business owner friends. I don't think that is going to happen. But 31% of 2023 and 24 home buyers say purchasing a home was harder than expected because of financial reasons, such as exceeding their budget. It says since purchasing their home, 44% of recent buyers have had to take on additional debt to maintain their lifestyle, and 43% have struggled to make mortgage payments on time. Now, what does this mean? If we're looking at 44% of recent buyers have had to take on additional debt to maintain their lifestyle, I don't think that what they're talking about here is going out to eat lifestyle or shopping or getting their coffee at Starbucks lifestyle, spending $7 for a latte. I don't think that's what they're referring to here. I think that when they're talking about their lifestyle, they're really talking about life's necessities. They're talking about utility costs that have gone through the roof, property taxes that have skyrocketed, in a lot of cases doubled for home buyers, insurance premiums that, homeowner insurance premiums that have gone through the roof. Depending on where you live, you may have even had your homeowner policy canceled. Transportation expenses, fixing their cars, fuel for their cars, their car payment, and I think worse yet, their groceries. So I think that when we dive into, and we're not talking about the U.S. economy tonight, we're talking about home buyers and the mistakes that they've made. But they're synonymous. They go hand in hand. When we look at home buyers, the U.S. economy it's made things, we're so in such unaffordable times that for these people that have never been homeowners especially, they're really struggling. I mean, we see it. We get calls where sellers want to sell. They purchased in 2021, 2022. They can't afford their payment. I get emails every day. I get calls every day. So, these are pretty big numbers. The most important one we're going to focus here, and the most disturbing to me, is that 82% of Americans who bought a home in 23 or 24, and again, I think this extends even beyond that. Now, they are talking about 23 and 24, because that was sort of like, the peak of interest rates. But we can go really before that. In 2022, we watched the peak of home prices and what I consider the peak of home pricing. And we've been watching a downhill decline. Yes, it's market specific. People can argue with me and say that, areas and pockets in certain states and communities are still commanding high prices, selling in, a day or 2 days. But that's not when we look at the overall country at large, the Sunbelt states, some of the states where, like Florida, in Texas, Arizona, a lot of areas, North Carolina, that they're seeing some of the biggest softening of prices, and their sales are just flat right now. Where we're talking about a lot of new home construction, these sales are flat, their prices have come down, and guess what? Interest rates have been on the decline, mortgage interest rates, and that really hasn't helped either. But 82% of Americans who bought a home in 23 or 24 have at least one regret about the home buying process. It says, with buyers most likely to regret that their home requires too much maintenance. And this is something that we're failing as an industry. I think we're failing as a real estate industry, a real estate sales industry. Agents are failing at this miserably. And part of the problem is when they get their license, they're told that just sell houses, find ready, willing, and able buyers to buy a listing. And if you're working for the seller, the opposite, just find, ready, willing, and able buyers, and that's created a lot of complacency. A lot of people have put their commissions in front of their buyers. And in fact, a lot of them have put their commissions in front of their sellers as well, because in a lot of cases, the sellers feel that they can sell their house themselves. They feel like their agent didn't really do a whole lot. And a lot of this conversation is really coming after the last 4 or 5 years where the agents really didn't have to do a whole lot to sell a house. But when we're talking about 82% of Americans that have remorse, it's a huge number. It's disturbing. I think this actually goes back to 2020, 2021. I've, read multiple articles where it was anywhere from 70, 74% to this 82% number. But 85% of recent home buyers comprised or compromised on their priorities when purchasing a home. And we're going to cover this tonight in great detail. It says, although 48%, lost my spot here. Let's see. There we go. Although 48% of buyers wanted an affordable home, a whopping 37% bought a home that was more expensive than they planned. And in a previous survey, 94% of home sellers supported a new commission structure that would require the home buyer to pay their agent. And I think as we first started out with this show tonight, that's what most buyers are, what's sticking out to them the most. Some of the first questions that come out of their mouth when they reach out to agents are, do I have to pay you a commission and how much is it? I think, hey, if that's a win, at least that conversation is happening, because I think one of the reasons why we're here today is that a lot of buyers' agents didn't really explain to the buyer that there was a charge or cost for them doing business. A lot of them found out when they were at the settlement table on closing day, their most exciting day of their life, buying this house, or maybe the day before or a couple days before. They learned that their friend, in a lot of cases, is getting a $20,000 commission, for instance. When they're going, whoa, that's crazy. I brought every penny I had to the table. You didn't really tell me that was how much money you were making. They weren't really transparent. They would put on the buyer agency, per the MLS, they get paid, but they really didn't know what that was. There was no conversation about what that total amount was. And, a lot of buyers were really shocked at that. When it gets to, further, we talked about it, but 50% of upcoming buyers say that they would consider foregoing an agent because of that. So, and And then if they had to, this last bullet here that I want to kind of focus on, it says if they had to pay their agent, buyers say they'd lower their home buying budget by an average of $13,167. Well, I got news for you. Buyers don't have that. Again, I don't know where they come up with some of these things, but buyers don't have it. They barely have enough money to pay their closing costs, their lender, their appraisal fee, inspections if they get any. So, how they're going to write a check for this magical, $13,000 on average is just beyond me. So anyway, we're going to dive in tonight, but I do want to say that this is a live show right now. It's going on live. If you're listening to it after live, you can comment your questions and I'll be sure to get back to you. But if anyone wants to come on the show tonight, we have published the link to bring you on. But I only want you to come on if you have a buyer story. There's plenty of opportunities to come on our show and talk about what's going on. We just published a video on Saturday. Google was not very friendly about the show. We had really low viewership because of the topic, but we were talking about this allegation of fraud in property taxes. This guy, Mitch, that has been covering this very closely. He's actually has a lawsuit going and quite interesting. You can find it on our show. There it is there. But a lot of people reached out to me because of this, wanting to tell me their story. One left me a message. I need to call her back here in the next couple of days, but left me a message saying that she was dealing with an estate and it was a trailer home or a mobile home, has a frame, like a chassis and frame, and there's a reverse mortgage on it. I don't think that's legal to have a reverse mortgage. So apparently there may have been, some kind of, crazy stuff going on to actually qualify a owner of a trailer with a reverse mortgage. So that was one of the messages. But anyway, if you have a story, a buyer story, and you want to come on tonight, I'd love to hear from you. I think that the biggest thing that we can do as buyers is that you can do as a buyer that has some kind of remorse or story to tell is that you can actually share it right here on our platform, because I think you're going to help a lot of people by doing so. So what we're going to do is we're going to count them. This is no mad science to my countdown here, but it's what I see. Now, I have been a contractor serving the housing market for a very long time, 35 years, and I've either worked at houses that were getting ready for the market, built houses that were sold, rehabbed houses where I had other agents. This is way before I was even a licensed real estate agent, let alone a licensed broker. I'm talking about 35 years of history and dealing in this industry and seeing some of the biggest mistakes. Now, when buyers make mistakes, sellers benefit in a lot of ways. If they have good agents that are dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and a lot of times there's little to no recourse. You could sue people. A lot of times when you go into, if you look into your contracts that you're signing, your sale contracts, a lot of times you're signing that you will mitigate, have some type of mediation process prior to a litigation process. So it's not easy bringing your claims in front of the court. It's costly. It takes years. And quite honestly, and a lot of times it's not worth it, because it will cost you more money to be a plaintiff in a case than it will what you get or just paying for the harm that you received really on something that's probably your fault in many cases, right? By just not making good buying decisions. And what we're talking about here is a house. We're not talking about a clunker that has, 250,000 miles on it that you're buying on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace that if it works out, great. If it doesn't, or you spend more money than fixing it than you purchased, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a house. It's a long-term commitment. A lot of people don't even realize what that means. And they make mistakes and by their own doing. So this list, we're going to start sort of backwards. We're going to count it down as 10 being, okay, I'm saying as the least costly. It all ultimately ends up the same at the same place, but we're going to count this thing down and kind of go through it. Some of them we'll spend some more time on than others, and we're going to take some questions and comments along the way. And again, if you're somebody that wants to come on our show, Joe will bring you in and let me know that you're waiting. So again, that link is pinned at the top of the live chat. So let's go ahead and get started. Number 10, I'm saying wrong timing. We can identify what timing means in a lot of different ways, but the root of all the bad timing over the last 4 or 5 years has been from fear of missing out, which we know is FOMO. And for those that don't know what it is, that's what it is. Fear of missing out. The younger people know exactly what I'm talking about. And the exuberance of competing. So a lot of people, when I talk to a lot of the home buyers that really bought at the wrong time, the number one thing I heard the most, and you have to keep in mind, this isn't just based on the transactions that I do. I've been podcasting this real estate channel for more than 5 years. We've been doing the Tuesday Night Live for 4 years. So I get hundreds of emails a day. I get calls every single day of people with just story after story after story. So I think I can pretty much, when I'm giving you this list and going through things, I have a good handle, probably more of a handle than any other real estate agent in the country, okay? Or any other real estate broker in the country. Their brokers focused on managing their agents in a lot of cases, not producing volume. And a lot of these agents that are just out selling properties every day, they're not really hearing the stories. So real estate channel, 4 years plus at least, listening to everyone talk. But the number one reason that people went ahead and bought was because they were jealous of their friends. These are young folks. They go to college, they get careers, they come out, and their friends buy a house. Maybe they have jobs that pay more money. A lot of them now are looking at their friends that are complaining, and they have one or two peers where they didn't buy a house, but their peers did, and now they're listening to their peers complain and wish they hadn't bought yet. So timing, number 10, jealousy being at the top of the list. And what I have to say is, look, guys, we have to focus on what our own capabilities are. And what young people forget is that you've got a lifetime here to own a home, to buy things, to save money, and have something really nice for yourself. You'll get it, but just make sure the timing is right. And the other thing is they were pressured because of their lease. So if your lease is expiring, and let's just say in March, in a lot of the, in this exuberance, their thought was, oh my gosh, I've been leasing for 2 years. I'm throwing my money away. This is the industry pushing them, real estate agents pushing them. You're wasting your money renting. It's the biggest mistake, one of the biggest lies we can give to people that aren't ready to buy a house. We're pressuring them, getting them, you know what, their lease is coming to an end. You better start looking now. Let's get you pre-qualified. So a lot of people don't realize that when their lease is coming up for an end, you have a lot of options that you can explore. Number one, if it's a mom and pop landlord, you could explore a month-to-month lease. You can explore a quarterly lease. You can explore a 6-month lease. So there are options instead of just going in for year to year. Now, that's not available everywhere. If you're in a corporate situation where you're an apartment complex or corporate landowner, landlord, they may force your hand to sign for another year, or you might have to move. But guys, sometimes it's just what you have to do. We watched millions of millennials move back with mom and dad in 21 and 22, millions. More multi-generational families and households living together. Now, I'm not trying to say that that's a cool thing to do at 30, 35 years old to move back with mom and dad, but you have options. That's not a reason to run off and buy a house. And the other one that I just want to point out is that I heard a lot of people say they just got a new job, a new career, and they just needed to go out and buy a house because they felt that was the next thing to do. But they didn't realize that the new career came with risks. And a lot of companies have laid off, and a lot of these people that have bought a home maxed out have lost their jobs. And now they are in payment default. And, so we really need to look at timing to make sure that it's the most appropriate thing for you to do in buying a home. Number 9 is not having a clear set of needs and wants. So a lot of the people that bought houses, they didn't really make a good list of what they had to have. And that's what I tell people that have never bought a home before. You need to sit down and make a list of things that you must have. If you're a family or you're having kids and this is a long-term goal, to buy a house, it is a long-term goal, and you want to start having kids, you may need 4 bedrooms. That may be an absolute must, right? You may need to have 2 bathrooms. You may need to have a garage. Maybe you have some type of home business, or you're starting a business and you need space, you need a garage. So coming up with a clear list of things that if you were to buy a house, they're the must-haves. You have to have those things. You need a yard. You have dogs. You want to be in a community, in a cul-de-sac, so that your kid can ride bikes. Whatever it is, come up with a clear set of needs. Because what happens is you go out, you look at houses, you have a price in mind or a pre-qualification, and you are just navigating through the thorns. You have no idea what it is. It's like, yeah, this kind of grabs me, or that doesn't grab me, or I like this, or this could work, or whatever. They have no set, clear goals. They buy the house and are like, man, we really needed this and we bought that. So having a clear set of goals, what you must have and what you would like to have. Because what happens is, and I watched this happen a bunch too, where, young couple, went out looking at houses and didn't want a pool, but it wasn't on the list, but there was a pool. And they were going to buy the house because it had a pool. The house was junk. It had aluminum wiring. It was a disgrace. It had mold in the furnace room. It was really a lot of deferred maintenance, and they were willing to forego all of that because it had a pool. And the pool wasn't even good. The underground pipes had broken. They rerouted the plumbing. They capped off the pipes that were in the ground. The plumbing pipes that were feeding the water into the pool were actually on top the grade, traveling across the pool deck, the concrete pool deck, and spilling out into the pool. I mean, it was a complete disaster. And the only thing that they could see was how cool that this would be to have a pool and have their friends come over, watch football, heat the pool, jump in the pool, whatever, use it all year round. And it was the most ridiculous thing ever. Thank goodness we were able to talk them out of it. And it was the best decision that they made. So, but again, this is what I'm talking about when having a clear list of things that you must have and things that would be nice but aren't required to keep you focused, right? And don't just jump at the first house that checks off some of the boxes, right? So, timing and having that clear list. Before we go to number 8, I want to see if we have any questions here, any comments. And again, I want to tell you that it's a live show, guys. If you want to come on, we'd love to have you jump in here. Do we have a caller? All right, let's bring Dan in. Let's go ahead and keep the callers. We don't want to keep them waiting. Let me get my AirPods in here. All right, Dan, are you with me? Hey, Dan. No, Dan. Is he there? No. Okay. All right, Dan. Maybe he had to go. If you, again, we'd love to have you call in, but let's go ahead and take some questions and comments. All right, Todd, what happens if an experienced but unrepresented buyer asks a listing agent to arrange a house viewing and then makes an offer? All right, so there are some states where there can be a transactional agent, transactional brokerage, where the we call this dual agency. An agent has the ability to write an offer for a buyer and represent the transaction, where the buyer and seller are doing the negotiations. I don't know how that was ever legal, in my opinion, because you can't really represent both parties. They call it representing the transaction. So it really depends on what state that you're in. What we're really talking about with the new rule is buyer representation, where the buyer has an agent that's separate than the listing agent. They have somebody that just is, they're representing the buyer, and that's it, not the transaction. They're representing the buyer and, looking after their best interest. So in going down this, we would first need to know what state you're talking about, if they are transactional brokers, or whether it would be illegal for them to represent both parties. Like in Maryland, an agent can't do that. So what would happen, let's just take it as in how we would handle it here. What would happen in this situation is that we call the buyer one of two things. We call them either a client or a customer. The difference is the client has a signed buyer agency agreement. The customer has no representation. But as a listing agent, in your question, someone who has the listing where they cannot represent the transaction, both sides, they would have to, as in Maryland, they would have to offer you certain things. They have to offer you timeliness. They can't ignore you. If you call them, they have to call you back in a timely fashion. If you want to write an offer, they have to respond to you in a timely fashion. They can't lie to you. So they have to be truthful. They can't give you personal opinions. They're not going to disclose things that they don't have to. But if they know things that would be harmful to you as a buyer, whether you're represented or not, they're required, the listing agent is required to tell you. Now, what could something like that be? Well, it's not raining, we're in a dry spell, but the seller has identified to the listing agent that in heavy rains, their basement leaks. That would become a material fact that agent would need to tell you, even if you're unrepresented. There are other situations as well, but they would provide you with key service, let you in the house, open the door for your home inspector should you have one. So there are a lot of things that listing agent, even though they're not representing you as a buyer, that they could do for you. They could even prepare the offer. They can't fill it out, but they could put all the forms together and give it to you and say, here you go. Here's all of the paperwork, fill it out. If you're unrepresented in where a transactional broker is not allowed, like in Maryland, if you said to me, Todd, well, what do you think I should offer? I would have to tell you, well, I can't tell you that. I mean, I can't give you my opinion on, what you should offer the seller. So, that is quite possible. I don't recommend it. You say an experienced but unrepresented buyer, I am not a fan. Look, I talk about it all the time. There's plenty of bad agents out there, but there's a lot of good agents. I am not a fan of buyers being unrepresented, even if they have experience. If you have an agent that sold 60 houses in the last 12 months and you as a experienced buyer bought 2 houses in your entire lifetime, and the last time you bought a house was 20 years ago, you're kind of at a disadvantage. Now you're smart. You can hire an attorney. You can have a title attorney do things for you. There are things that you can do. But let's face it, you're not good at home buying. We're a good buyer, experienced buyer agent that will put you first, will just hands down do a super job for you. And, I know a lot of agents that their buyers have never complained about the service that they've gotten. I've had my buyers that I've helped are very grateful that I was along with their purchase. But you can do it on your own. I mean, you don't have to. A lot of people did, especially over the last, several years where their agent never even saw the house. And the buyer went through the open house, the buyer standing room only, said to their agent, will you please just put an offer in for me? And they're like, yeah, sure. What do you want to offer? And they, you're going to have to be over list price, or you're going to give all your rights up to inspection. Yeah. I just want the house, whatever. Or do I have to? And the agent's like, yeah, you're not going to get it if you want an inspection. Those agents really didn't help their buyers very much, in my opinion. That buyer would have been just as well off to not have an agent in those cases, a lot of cases. But good agents are going to be worth it no matter what. And I know you guys don't want to hear that. You want to hear that we're a waste, but it's you're just not going to get that out of me. It's just not the truth. If I thought it was the truth, I'd tell you it's the truth. But anyway, getting back to the question, you could certainly buy a house yourself. I would recommend, before you do that, call me and let's talk about it. Let's talk about your situation. I'd be glad to give you a 15-minute free phone call to hear your story, see what it is, why you don't want to have an agent, and then see if I can give you a couple pointers to do it on your own. We got somebody on? All right, Dan. All right, let's bring him on. Dan, what's up, buddy?
I'm back, Todd. Can you hear me?
You are back. What's up? How are you? Where are you calling from?
Oh man, Mr. Todd, a pleasure to speak with you, man. I'm a fellow realtor. I actually am I'm a millennial, and I got started in 2010. I actually couldn't get into the workforce. I got sick and tired of going to job interviews right around that time. I graduated college in 2008, and I stumbled across a gentleman that was flipping homes in one of the roughest parts of LA, and he kind of inspired me, and I got into it from there, and been doing it ever since now. And
are you in LA now?
No longer. I moved out, like a lot of millennials, except I didn't move far enough out. I should have gone out of state, I think, but I'm in the Inland Empire.
Okay.
Yeah, out here, and I love your content, man. I think you're real, and it's very refreshing because being in the industry as long as I have, there's a lot of cheerleading, and it makes me sick, especially because I know a lot of the exploitation is on, I'm a firstborn generation American, born here, and there's a lot of exploitation of the immigrant community on the buyer side, and it's just it's pretty gnarly. And the worst thing is, it's sometimes our own, it's other fellow Hispanic kids like me doing it, and it's rough, but. Again, it's very refreshing.
Dan, let me stop you right there for a minute, because I want to tell you one of the issues that we have, that I know anyway, is that I don't believe the contracts, there are any National Association of Realtor contracts or state contracts, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, in Spanish.
They are not. And fortunately for my clients and me, because I was pretty much the oldest of my siblings, I was the first translator, so having to deal so much with real estate, and I would look up the words in the dictionary, and then I had a uncle who was an attorney in Mexico. That really helped out a lot too when I wasn't sure about certain things. I could reach out to him, but yeah, that's.
But that puts you in liability. I mean, what a lot of people don't realize, and we have a Spanish speaking realtor. He's from El Salvador, and he does a great job. But a lot of the issue becomes, and I've always said this. I just think this is just trouble on the horizon, because if if you're explaining a contract to somebody, and I'm not picking on you, man. I respect what you're doing, but if you explain a contract to somebody, you know, we could actually be accused of practicing law without a license to do so. And it says right at the top of the contract that if you have any, if you don't understand the contract, seek competent legal counsel. And I think you're right. I think unfortunately, and I'm sure different, but I think you had started off with saying that there's a lot of exploitation, and I could see how that could be very easily done, because if a Spanish speaking buyer doesn't understand the English vocabulary or language enough to read the English contract, that's an issue for me. But I'm sure you're doing a great job, and we should have it. I mean, we should. Why wouldn't we have it? We should have it.
There is no national language, and there are citizens that I'll tell you their only language is their native tongue, and I'll say my mother is in that group, so. They
Yeah.
should have it. And again, I'm just kind of trusting that the realtor forms, I'm trusting in the attorneys, how they're written right, and doing my best to get a direct translation. It's pretty
Right.
much
So
all.
what are you seeing as the biggest buyer regret or buyer remorse in the last couple of years?
In the last couple of years, I have quite the story about that. I got in my family, unfortunately, in 2021, 2022, the real estate euphoria. My family forgot that I was a realtor, and one of my parents ended up buying a commercial lot, thinking he was going to build out, an office space. And I'm telling him, Dad, you're going against the current. I would highly advise you against this. They ended up going directly with the listing agent and buying it, and he's been sitting on it now for almost 4 years, and he hasn't been able to build nothing on it. So although he hasn't admitted the regret, I'm sure that was not the plan. Buy it, sit on it for 4 years, and pay a high interest rate on an owner carry. So that's one. I would say probably the common thread with the people that I ran into that kind of have some kind of regret. It's that they were buying when everybody was just in the euphoria, and unfortunately some people feel insecure about home ownership, especially when they're parents. I notice, I'm not a parent myself, but I notice other folks that are parents, they'll pull out all the stops, and unfortunately, I know that later down the line they may have some regret. And I honestly turn them away, because where I work, it's a small town, and we run into everybody. So if I was associated with transactions gone wrong, I wouldn't be able to walk around in my little town where I'm at. But yeah, I would say it was just buying on emotion is probably the biggest mistake. And I've been guilty of that before. I'm in a property right now that although it's a small little property, but we're having a hard time getting out of it. But the same mistake. But you get a little overexcited, and I think in general, when you think you got it all figured out, that's probably when you're most in danger. That's like you missed something. There's no way you got it all figured out.
Yeah. Well, Dan, we appreciate you, man, jumping on here, and stay close to us. Send me an email, and ts@saxrealty.com. Let's connect. Let me know what you do. You never know. I may be able to send somebody your way.
Absolutely, Todd. Great talking to you, man. Good luck.
Yep.
Love the
Yes,
podcast.
sir. Thank you so much. All right, so we got Steve on deck. Oh no, that's our Steve. Okay, all right. All right. Well, wait a minute. We got Austin. Let's bring him in. Hey, Austin, what's going on, man? How are you? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from New York. How you doing? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great. Yeah. Thanks for calling in. What's going on? What's your story?
Yeah, so I actually lease apartments here in downtown Brooklyn for a large company. I don't want to say the company, but luxury buildings. I've been here for just over 4 years, and I've been seeing some very disturbing trends in terms of, the amount of debt that people come in with, specifically student loan debt. And it seems that even my management and underwriting doesn't really factor in, and has not been factoring in, the student loan debt in terms of their ability to meet the 40 times the income requirements. Now, that's been all fine because technically on paper, you haven't had to make these payments. But a lot of them are going to be due starting soon. And also, it'll hit your credit report about 90 days after. I think it's something around like 22 or 23% of people who have a student loan balance are still currently not making payments on them. So my greater point is that I think we're going to really hit a credit crunch is really what's going to cause the next downturn. Unlike in 2008, where you really had all of the larger institutions driving a lot of the issues in terms of the lending and on all of the lax standards there. Here, I think it's consumers. There's a ton more of shadow debt. We don't get to see people's buy now, pay later exposure. And the percentage of people utilizing that on a individual basis for just perishable items has gone up exponentially. So the point here is I want to get your thoughts on is, do you think that America has, or Americans have this compulsion to kind of always take the free money? Like, do you think on credit, do you think that that's something that we can really change, just by talking about it?
Well, when you say free money, are you talking about government free money, or are you talking about
like extended lines of credit? In other words, any institution that's willing to lend it to people, it seems like each time there's become a ceiling, you get more and more people that are willing to just, hey, if someone will offer me another $1,000 on a credit card, I'm.
But you said that's free money.
Well,
that's not free money.
Not free. That's what I didn't mean to say free. What I meant to say is that people are perceiving it as if it's a free credit, so to speak, like extra lines of credit, extra ways to spend money that they don't have.
Yeah, I think the issue is that we are now at the tail end of this, where the people that are, if you have a high balance on your credit card, they're going to cut your balance, your credit limit back. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of cases, you'll see where they will drop your credit limit and then charge you an over the credit limit fee. Because what happens is if your credit limit is dropped and then you're actually paying the minimum payment, but you're paying 34%, 35% interest, you're actually adding to, your debt is increasing. It's not coming down. Mm-hmm. And then if you're missing a payment or two payments and then you go over the limit and then they start banging you with the over the limit fee. I mean, these banks are just destroying people, in my opinion. They've lured them in. They brought them into this low interest environment. And now that people can't pay it back, that's when they sock it to you. They sock it to you when you're struggling the most. It's like being kicked in the teeth when you're down. And the issue is, I don't think we're going to see them extend more credit to people that are in debt. I think we're going to see it tighten. I think it's going to be harder to get credit. Now, if there is an opportunity to get extra, the buy now, pay later, they're going to take it. Mm-hmm. If there's an ability for people to get a home equity line of credit when they're maxed out, they're going to take it. If there's an opportunity to get a second mortgage on a house where you can bundle your credit card debt and strip their equity away that they have in the house, they're going to take it. They're going to do whatever they can to kick their can down the road. But a lot of people, once they get to a certain point, they don't even care anymore. It's like, what are you going to do to me? I can't pay it back. You shouldn't have given it to me in the first place. I'm going to just not pay it. And I'm going to bankrupt, or I'm going to do something, just not pay my bill. So, and that's where we're going to see. I think that we're at that point now with the delinquency rates.
So even with that being said, where you think institutions are going to start cutting people's lines of credit, I'm kind of seeing the opposite, right? So let's say Chase, for instance. I bank with Chase. I'm pre-qualified. I won't say what my salary is, but they pre-qualified me for a monthly payment that would be 89% of my take-home pay if you include the.
But are you going to do it?
No. But the point is
you're not going to. You're a different borrower. You're a different borrower.
Correct. I'm not going to. The problem
you're
is
not in debt. You're not in debt up to your eyeballs. The one that's in debt up to their eyeballs, they're not offering that to.
No, I know, but the fact is that if that is even on the table for the most conservative lending institution in America, Chase, right? They're trying to move out of these low interest loans that they have on their books because they're losing money on John and Susan, hundreds and thousands of Johns and Susans paying 3.5, 3.9%.
But smart money's not going to take the bait. Why would you? You're not going to take the bait. I mean,
Correct.
people that have their finances under control are not taking this bait.
I agree.
The bait is has already been thrown out.
Mm-hmm.
It's already thrown out. That's where they make their money. They make their money on that bait, where the people are not going to be able to afford to pay it back. That's when they jack the interest rates up, whack them with fees, late fees, over the credit limit fees, any other fee that they possibly can, and they keep them in debt for as long as they possibly can, and people just keep paying a minimum.
Correct.
It's a tragedy.
To further one last thing to further your point is, now that you know that this is the most conservative bank is doing these practices, even though normal people, smart people are not taking this bait. To me, it says a lot about the desperation of these larger banking institutions. The fact that they're willing and able to let someone do 3% down and be 89, 90% of their take home pay. The fact that that's even on the table tells me that the pool of buyers who can truly qualify for the even smaller amount of homes that are available, let's not say nationally, but locally, I think it's going to lead to a larger problem a lot quicker than people think. And I don't think dropping the interest rates, 50, 100 basis points over the next 3 to 6 months is going to solve that by the Fed.
100% no. You're right about that. I mean, I think what we're going to see tomorrow is a quarter of a point. I know that there's a lot of talk that they want a half a point. They're going to meet in, several more times this year. I think we'll get a quarter point kind of thing. I don't think we're going to see a half a point. And even if we did, it wouldn't do anything anyway. I mean, we're talking about, here's the thing. This is the predatory nature, what I consider the predatory nature of when somebody's down, you kick them in the face, right? And I don't agree with this. I think this is terrible. But I think that people get into a situation, a lot of people that are in debt right now and that are paying 34, 35% in credit card bills are in that position, not because they went out and wasted money. A lot of these people are just trying to survive. They're just trying to feed their family. They're just trying to buy food for their family, get to work, fix their car. I don't believe that we have this this negligence as the rule. Certainly there are people that are negligent. They're bad spenders. They no matter what economy, they're going to be in debt. Good times, bad times, they're going to waste all their money. I don't think that's what we're looking at. When we look at, the worst economy that we've seen in 40, 50 years, and the cost of living, just feeding your family, I think a lot of people, their credit card debt is that, right? Getting to work. So what's happening is now they're really reeling it in. So let me ask you a question. If somebody owes $5,000, it may as well be $100,000 to many people, a $5,000 credit card balance. More than likely, it's more than that. It may be even $10,000. Maybe it's a couple credit cards that they've maxed out. They're at 34%. Now, all of a sudden, tomorrow, the Fed comes out, drops the rate that the banks have to pay to borrow money. Do you think they're going to go back to those people that are struggling paying their bill and lower their interest rate?
No.
I don't either. I think they're going to continue to make the money. They're going to continue to rake it in. And, I think that's where we are. But, yeah. Well, I appreciate you, man.
No problem.
Anything else?
I want to say, been watching your show for a long time. Sometimes we meet in the comments, which is always nice to interact with you. I really do appreciate it. Maybe one day I can come down and be on the show. I'd love to talk more stuff with you.
Come on down.
But definitely happy to be here. And I'll say one last thing about the rates. I think the effect of the rates, typically it's a lagging indicator, the way it affects the individual, right? It affects the institutions and the individuals. 18 months or so of these elevated rates and then slowly dropping down 50, even again, 100 basis points over the next 6 months. It's going to be meaningless. And people are actually going to be surprised that it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
The damage is done. it's only, I mean, we need to buckle up because it's going to be a rough time. I was talking with a contractor. I'll end with this with you, but I had a contractor stop by today. We were talking. I've known this guy for 20 plus years. And, it was kind of not getting political, but, he was kind of talking about the candidates and stuff like that. And, who he's going to, who he's thinking about voting for, not even from a political aspect. You have to understand a lot of contractors like myself. I mean, I never got involved in politics. I got up every day, laced up my boots and went to work. All I cared about is the economy. Is the economy good? Is the economy bad? Have we had a good economy or a bad economy? Can my clients afford to pay the bill or not? That is my success. It's a business owner's success. It's a restaurateur's success. We're seeing restaurants close all across the country, and retail stores and all. It's a mess. But so I said to him, do you know who you're going to vote for? He was talking about it. I said, do you know? And he said, no, I really don't. He's like, all I know is that I'm having the worst few years of my career. And my clients can't afford anything. Nobody's spending any money other than what they have to. And we have to look at that. And, and then people want to continually comment about how, I'm one-sided or the other-sided. I'm not one-sided or the other-sided. I am pro money in your pocket. Do we have money in the pocket or not? And that's the problem, and nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah, anyway. we don't. Yeah, sorry, but last thing, sorry, just you brought it up. We don't, and we're not going to, because if the tax cuts sunset like they're supposed to at the end of this year, then what's going to happen is someone who's making $80,000 a year as a gross salary is going to, on average, if they're full-time doing that, regular pay, they're going to wind up taking home anywhere between $1,600 and $2,000 less total for the year if those tax cuts go through. So to me, that's what I'm thinking about, the everyday person who's working, trying to keep more money in their pocket. So again, thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Austin. God bless, man.
Take care, man. Have a good night.
Okay, you too. All right, so good stuff. We're hearing from two industry professionals here, one on the more of the West Coast and then the East Coast here. Close to us, New York. So we appreciate them contributing to our show. So let's go ahead. We'll dive back in. We'll take more of your questions, but I want to continue this countdown because it'll get away from me, and I won't be able to cover it. So number 8 on the list that I want to go over right now is has to do with HOAs. Some of the biggest mistakes that we've seen are people buying into HOA communities and not really understanding what that means for them. Financial implications, what that means, and restrictions, property restrictions. You buy a house, you're spending $400,000 or $500,000 or more, $700,000, $1 million, depending on where you are in the country. You're moving into these homeowner associations, and a lot of them are new communities. And they're waking up now a couple years later saying, wow, I'm sorry I bought into this HOA, and we'll go over a couple of the reasons. When you buy into an HOA that's a brand new community, it is under construction. I want you to understand one thing. The developer, they want the lowest, cheapest HOA fees possible because that's how you qualify to buy their house. And if they're high HOA fees, it doesn't look very good when you're selling these new builds. But what they do is when they're budgeting and putting their community's budget together, the initial homeowner association documents, the maintenance requirements, a lot of times they're not very practical with the real cost of maintaining that community. The trees get bigger in time, things wear and tear, sidewalks, crack, heave, need to be replaced. Things happen to, the grounds. Those costs can go up exponentially in just a matter of a few years. So when you're buying in an HOA, you need to actually read the documents that are provided to you before, as part of your contingency, before you agree to continue forward. You review those documents and you want to know, what are the restrictions? Some of the restrictions that I've heard where people have really complained is that the HOA says that they can't have a fence or that they can't have a privacy fence. They can only have certain fences. Other things, they can't have outdoor structures like a shed. So if you actually want to park your car in the garage, where do you put your bikes? Where do you put your lawnmower if you're responsible for cutting your own grass? People don't realize they want to get a shed, they can't have it. I had a situation one time on a house that I sold. I was a listing agent where buyers were buying the house. It was a big piece of property. I mean, if you drove into this community, it was about 5 acres. The houses were spread apart, which you don't see anymore. They cluster them today, but they were all spread apart. And the buyer had a scuba diving business. He was a scuba diving instructor. And he didn't have an actual store. He had an online following, and they would sign up for his instruction, and they would meet, go out on a boat, and he would teach them how to scuba dive. But what he really wanted was to have this really big detached shed. It was like a garage, like maybe it was 12 by 20, a big outdoor shed, so that he could put all of his scuba gear in. Well, what happened was it wasn't allowed. So when he bought the house, one of the first things that he did was ordered this shed that he had built, dropped off at the house. A knock was at the front door, was the president of the association said, "You got to get rid of that shed. We don't allow them here, no outside structures." This turned into be a big deal. Ultimately, it's your responsibility as a buyer to, look over documents, make sure that you're allowed to do what it is that you want. Kind of goes back to my checklist, making sure that you're writing down everything that's important to you. That should have been on the checklist, having the ability to have an exterior detached building to store your scuba diving gear, right? But there are architectural committees. They'll tell you what colors you can use, what you can use, what you can't use, what materials you can use, you can't use. They'll get on you for not cutting your grass, not pulling your weeds, not painting your shingles if the color fades, all kinds of things that these HOAs will, be a real pain in your, what. But the crazy thing is they can foreclose on you. They can cause you big problems. They can sue you. Your own association can sue you. The other thing is that these board members, they run their term. Some get on the board just to get something changed. I've even seen it where you're not allowed to have more than 2 dogs and you have 3 dogs and you didn't tell your agent that you had 3 dogs, but you brought your 3rd dog in and the association told you had to get rid of one of your dogs, and they would start fining you and cause you all kinds of problems for having that extra dog. I had buyers that bought a home in an HOA one time, and they said that their dog was old and they didn't expect it to live very much longer. I mean, it was terrible, and it was a big problem. So, that's a big a big mistake that a lot of people experience when they buy a house. But make sure not only do you look at the restrictions, the covenants, the restrictions, but also look at their financial statement. How many people are delinquent in the community? Because if you move into a community where there's a really high delinquency, chances are they're going to continue to raise the rates at a more accelerated rate because they have to make up for the deficiency of the people that aren't paying their dues. The other thing is, I had a house in a community one time that it was a flip. And, no matter, I learn on every transaction. I mean, even being in the business for as long as I've been in, I've made mistakes myself. But I bought this townhouse that was in foreclosure. It was part of an HOA. I remodeled it and I put it on the market to sell. The problem was the roads were they were owned by the association. They weren't a county or a city owned road. And the association was responsible for repaving the road. And it had the biggest deferred maintenance. It was cracked. It was busted up. There were sinkholes in it. And they were getting ready to do a massive assessment to all of the owners to repave the roads in the community, the parking and the roads. And they were going to break it out over a 4-year period, I think it was, and do different courts at different years. But again, not diving, if you need to dive into that and say, how many assessments has this property had, HOA assessed the owners, grabbed more money from them, not dues, but assessments on top the dues, $1,000 hit, $500 hit, $2,000 hit. How many of those assessments have been done in the last 5 years? Because that's going to tell you also in that HOA how well or poorly their HOA is managed. So anyway, HOA's a big deal. I've said on my show multiple times, I wouldn't buy a home personally to live in a homeowners association. I have clients that do it all the time, but not my thing. Number 7 on the list is a bad lot and a bad location. And we saw this really happen when there was no inventory out there. Houses were coming on the market. People were scarfing them up. A lot of the buyers now would say, you know what, I would have never bought this lot. I would have never purchased this house had it not been, just pushed on me. Where I was having that FOMO, afraid to not buy something. My lease was ending, and they bought that bad lot or that bad location. One of the best attributes to a property, and I get fought on this constantly. The house is a depreciating structure. It falls down. It actually loses value every single year, the actual house. Believe me, don't fix up a house and watch what happens. The roof goes bad, starts leaking inside, siding falls off the house, windows are bad, appliances stop working, heating and air systems shut down. The actual structure itself and the contents, the house, depreciates. That's why commercial investors, landlords, get to write that depreciation off on their taxes. So on the commercial side, I'm talking about residential, but commercial being landlords that are non-owner occupied houses, they get to depreciate these houses off of their tax return. You as a homeowner do not. You don't get to depreciate it. So what happens is the house is imploding around you. What really increases in value is the land, the lot. That becomes more valuable every single year. Now we're taxed more on the structure than we are the land because they look at, the square foot, to replace it, to build the house. That's how you get your tax bill. Really, I think you should be getting your tax bill, if anything, property taxes on the land because your property value is going up. They take like 70% of that and call it the structure. That's where your property is being taxed at, the most. But anyway, what you have to do is when you're looking at these lots, the houses, know that you can do a lot to improve the house. There's very little that you can do to improve the land. Now you could landscape it, build walls, things like that. But if your house is on a very big slope or an undesirable lot, a busy street, noisy, the neighbors are, have been there forever. They're not going anywhere. They have 12 dogs. They have 3 junk cars in the backyard. This location or lot becomes one of the most important parts of your life in living in your house. So, really consider, what kind of lot do you want? Do you want a lot of maintenance? Do you want little maintenance, a lot of grass, a little lawn? Do you want to be on a mountainside, a slope? But really consider your location and your lot because when you go to sell, if there's a lot of inventory at the time of you selling your house, people are going to be judging your property by its curb appeal and by the lot. So let's make sure, you put that as one of your top priorities. We have any questions, Joe? All right, let's see what we got here. Take a couple questions before we move on to number 6. Can an HOA agree to disband itself and incorporate back into the city? You know, that's a good question. I know that there are there are a lot of HOAs that are very inactive, very informal, and there are HOAs that are actually involuntary to get the community to agree to something like that. I'm not really sure. I wish I knew the answer to that, but I guess it's possible. I would guess it's like having a condominium association. You could actually take it out of being a condo, but you might have to buy everybody else's condo in order to do so. So, you know, somebody that bought into an HOA that stands for the HOA, can the body itself agree to disband? I don't know. That's an attorney question. What are your thoughts on HOA in a townhome community that costs are inclusive of roofing funds? You know, you're seeing this a lot more. Now, I know an HOA can include or vote to include more things, so they can do that. And I'll give you an example. When a lot of the townhome communities with an HOA, they'll say that you're responsible for cutting to the sidewalk in the front yard, or 10 or 15 feet to the, you know, to the side yard if you're an N unit, or maybe you have 10 or 15 feet in the backyard that you're responsible for. I have seen HOAs that vote to include their whole community in with the landscaping costs. I know there are certain ways of doing that. I think at that point, if you're massively changing the HOA, you have to poll the community and maybe do something different than just have your board members vote at a monthly meeting, you know, something major like that. But when you get into covering cost of the roofs or siding and things like that, the exterior of the structure, you're essentially adding to the costs of that HOA. So what happens is now everyone gets a roof replacement if the board wants that. You know, they don't want to patch. They don't want to, you know, extend the life of a existing roof. So they get into a situation where they may say, look, we're going to set up a study, a reserve study. The roof should be replaced in every 30 years. This is just something that's going to happen, whether you like it or not. That is going to significantly increase the HOA fees. Now, it can be beneficial if you're living in an HOA where you're responsible for the roofs and your neighbor wants to patch a roof, and their way of patching the roof is putting a blue tarp on the roof for a temporary basis, and it just happens to be a year and a half, and you have to live with that, you know, pulling up to it every single day. So there are reasons why HOAs are good, you know, to keep your neighbors in check if they're, you know, not keeping up with their property at all. But again, that's another risk that you get where it can be good, where the HOA takes over the roofs. It can be a bad thing buying into an HOA where, you know, they really don't have much enforcement action on your neighbor who is letting their house fall apart for whatever reason. I don't like HOAs personally. All right, what are some tips for the first-time home buying that is also trying to pay for a wedding? All right. You know, I mean, who's paying for the wedding? I guess the first-time buyer's paying for the wedding. Some people are fortunate enough that their parents are paying for the wedding, but some have to buy it themselves, pay for their own wedding. I would probably say, you know, you're not going to want to hear this, but you have to prioritize. Do you want the house or do you want the wedding, the big wedding? A lot of people want a big wedding until they realize how much it costs, and you're feeding a lot of people that you maybe wouldn't feed, or maybe the last time you're ever feeding them again because you wouldn't invite them back after the wedding. You know, this is a personal choice. You have to decide, you know, if you really want a house and you have to pay for your own wedding, you may need to cut the wedding back in order to, you know, have that budget, that extra money for your home. So I would say if it were me, I would go for the house. I'm sorry to say, I would cut the wedding back and have a small wedding and save the money for the house if that's the two choices that you have. All right. Anything else? Questions? We have more. All right, but we'll keep going on our countdown here. All right, so number 6. This is the house is too outdated. And one of the reasons why we saw so many people buy a new house in the last 4 years was because, one, the builders had the inventory, but number 2, the buyers didn't have to negotiate and get their hopes up to be outbid. The builders opened up the lots. If you were on the list, they did pressure you. They told you they would only do 4 home sales that month in that subdivision. And if you were first on the list, you had to make a really quick decision. But you knew if you said yes, you got the home. So that was the second reason why new homes were really selling to first-time buyers. But thirdly is because when you buy a new home, because of the builder warranty and it being new for like at least 7 years, and on average, you have no cash outlay to repairs or maintenance on the house. And that's really almost at the time when you would be moving on. I mean, if we looked at the national average, 7 to 9 years on average is the time that a homeowner spends in that home before they either, move locations or move to a bigger house or, for whatever reason they move, 7 to 9 years. So there is that appeal on buying a new property. But a lot of buyers made the mistake of buying an outdated property, something that was built in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, where it had the original kitchen, the original bathrooms, and, even in the 50s and 60s houses, it had outdated electrical and plumbing. So what happened was, they bought these houses with the hopes of remodeling them. They got in, realized that their costs went up for the reasons that I explained before, and they didn't realize that a bathroom is one of the most expensive rooms in a house to renovate. A kitchen is the most expensive room in the house to renovate. So they went in saying, we can put new cabinets and we can renovate the kitchen. But the reason is because you don't realize that once you start taking those rooms apart, you realize that you're getting into flooring, new flooring repairs, plywood, repairing the floor with plywood from rotted boards, from water leaks. Maybe you found out that you started renovating the bathroom and you didn't realize that the tile floor was laid in a bed of mortar, and you have to jackhammer 4 inches of concrete and mortar out, including the tile. And now you have to build all that back up again, or that you just can't get the tub out without destroying the walls around it. So these become complete gut jobs. So a lot of young people were buying these outdated houses, and they weren't pressuring the sellers to contribute at all. They were getting top dollar for the homes. They were outdated, and a lot of people are, they're embarrassed to bring their friends into the house because of the condition of the house being so outdated, and the chances of them ever, a lot of these people, ever renovating them are slim to none. Worse yet is when they go to sell it, the chances are we'll never have another run in our lifetime like we experienced with this housing bubble. And when you go to sell it, the chances are that the new buyer is going to penalize you for those outdated kitchens and bathrooms because they're going to have more choices and more listings to choose from. And so that's a big mistake that a lot of buyers have made. All right, so we got a super chat here. Austin, man, good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. I guess is this Austin that we just talked to? Wow. Yeah, it is. If the house is outdated, it is overpriced. Outdated homes can be great for those in position to take on the cash intensive project. And, that is true. But, what happens, Austin, as we know, being in the business, a lot of people, they don't have the resources and they're hiring these contractors. They can't do it themselves. They hire the contractors to do it, and they go through a nightmare and a mess with that. But yeah, if you're an investor and you can get, reduced pricing, equity for outdated house, yeah, absolutely. It's going to be something where you'll have a chance to make a couple dollars on. Thanks for the super chat and calling in. I appreciate you. Number 5, wrong neighborhood. Now, we talked about the wrong lot, but now we want to talk about the wrong neighborhood, because what happened was, especially in the shutdown, people moved further out to areas that they would have never moved to if they were working in the office every single day. So what we're finding now is that a lot of people, young people, are saying they moved to a too rural area. They don't have their friends around them. They don't have a good walk score. Unless they have a car and they're driving 15, 20 minutes, they would have never picked that subdivision or that neighborhood. We also have people that didn't realize that the neighborhood wasn't what they expected. They didn't go back at certain times during the week, during the day, to know that after 5 o'clock, the road that they live on becomes a thoroughfare or a cut through of people coming home from work, or that there was a school right down the street. And, when school let out, their street was completely backed up with traffic, or that they were hearing, games, football games and baseball games, and a lot of noise from the area school. A lot of people, they don't like that. Some like to be across the street from the school, others don't. But we saw a lot of people just neglect researching the neighborhood, and we saw that with a lot of domestic migration. People were buying, homes from, never seeing the house, moving from California, moving from New York, moving from all of these states into your state, and they were completely reliant on the agent to give them the information. And, a lot of agents, as I said, they have commission breath. A lot of them are just interested in selling a house. So they're not, and you can only say so much about a neighborhood, which is the other point. We're not allowed to say, this is a bad neighborhood or high crime or whatever. You can't say things like that. But you can push them to resources that they can do more research on the community or the association. The other thing is that a lot of the agents, they don't know the neighborhood that you bought into. So they don't know that there's this big revitalization or a big commercial district or warehouse district that's going in down the street. And it's going to change the whole, layout of the community, or they're going to widen the road. I had one buyer called me up and said, "Hey, I need representation." This was in Maryland. And we had said that they had gone to this open house. They told the agent that they had an agent when they really didn't, but they called me afterwards and said, "Hey, we need help. We're looking at this house. It's kind of weird, the layout. We don't really understand it. A lot of different things were going on, and that didn't make sense." But the agent selling the house failed to tell them, and this is a material fact, that their driveway was actually going to be torn out. And it was going to be a 2-lane road with sidewalks on both sides. So their yard was actually going to get shrunken by a considerable amount of land. It was already, the lot line adjustments were already in play. And that nice farmer that they were talking about that plows the driveway for them, because it was a long driveway, and it was shared, that farmer actually had already sold the property, and it was going to be like 16 houses back there. And it was going to be a major subdivision. So the agent that had the open house, the listing agent, failed to tell this buyer that. And so, these are the kinds of things that big mistakes happen, right? That they didn't know and weren't told. They were moving to an area that they had no knowledge of. And, they were trusting on, what other people were telling them. So, things that can affect the neighborhood, obviously, retail. We have, when you see shopping centers that are struggling, the neighborhood changes tremendously because maybe the stores that you like to shop are going to be on their way out. They're going to move. You moved into a community because it's close to Target, but they're going to shut that Target down. So, a lot of people did very little research on their neighborhood, their community, and things changed and caused them to have a lot of regret. Number 4, not having enough cash reserves. Another big mistake, costly mistake. I've always said I want to see a buyer have 6 months of cash in their bank account. If they lose a job, have a financial hardship that they didn't plan for, will they be able to pay their bills, pay their mortgage payment for 6 months minimum? The other thing that goes with that, if you're carrying, like Austin and I were talking about debt, if you're carrying over credit card balances month after month after month, you're not ready to buy a house. If you can't pay your credit cards off at the end of every month, consistently for months and months and months on end, and you're responsible enough to only buy on your credit card what you can afford, if you're putting things that are necessities on your credit card and you can't afford to pay them off, don't buy a house. You're not ready to buy a house. So you don't have enough cash on hand to buy. Don't let a lender trick you into it, tell you that get the seller to pay all your down payment cash, come out of pocket with, grants or whatever, first-time buyer programs. If you don't have cash reserves, as I'm describing, wait. Save your money. You do yourself a favor. Don't be one of the 82% of the people that have bought in the last couple of years that have massive remorse. 28% of them, I think, are because they're financially struggling and not paying their mortgage payments on time. Number 3, maxing out and exceeding pre-approvals. This mistake people are making, they've been making them for years. What happens is you get qualified and magically that's your price point. You go to a lender who gets paid commission based on how much you borrow. You go to a real estate agent that gets paid a commission on the price of the home. The higher the price, the higher the commission in most cases. What happens is this. That's great. You want to buy a house, we're going to get you qualified. See what you can afford. Good lenders will say, what are you comfortable paying a month? And let's work backwards. What are you paying now? What are you comfortable paying? Most of the time, what we see happen, they go to the lender qualifies them for a top end price, and that's the price that we're shopping for. Hey, I'm approved for $475, $480, $250, whatever it is. That's my price, right? So what happens is that's where you buy. And that's the biggest, I think that's, we're getting into some of the top mistakes. This is one of the top mistakes. When you want to buy a house, be comfortable with what you want to pay every single month. If you get qualified for that payment and more, stick with what you're comfortable with. If you can't find a house in that price range, keep looking. Don't change your comfort level based on the availability of houses that are for sale that are going to suck you in and put you under financial stress to where you can't sleep at night because you can't pay your bills. Number 2, not getting a home inspection or hiring the wrong inspector. Now, I have a video that I made specifically about home inspectors being a joke. And for the most part, I agree with that. I have had some of the biggest home inspection companies literally screw my buyers by not doing a good job with the home inspection. National brands. Their contracts are written to protect them. And if they're good, in a lot of cases, they're considered a deal killer and the real estate agent won't recommend them. This is a problem. What you need to do is be responsible, and listen to what I'm saying here. The number one mistake we're getting to, but number two here, not getting a home inspection, forgoing your home inspection just to win the purchase of a house, is ridiculous. You need home inspections, but you need the proper home inspector. And a lot of times that means hiring contractors. That means hiring a home inspector who's a licensed contractor who has spent time in the construction industry and that is going to look at that house and give you a true perspective of what you're buying. Not tell you whether you should buy the house or not, but let you know, what are those costs going to be to own that house? What is it that you're buying? Are you buying a money pit? Should you be asking for things that the seller should be required to provide? And if they don't, that you should walk away. And this is really for my first-time buyers here. The wrong inspector. So I've had my attorney has told me story after story after story. We had one story he told me where, and the real estate commission gets to hear a lot of these. The courts get to hear a lot of these. But one story was where there was moisture in a basement, and it was a big deal. And there was mold in the basement. It was a health issue. It's in Maryland. This is here in Maryland. And they called the inspector to the stand. And the attorney had asked the inspector if they ever carried or ever used a infrared meter to determine if a wall was wet behind the wall. You can do that, based on the temperature, behind the wall. It shows up potential moisture. He said yes, that he did, but not with this particular agent. And the next question was, I don't know if it's the next question, but the question was asked, well, why don't you do it with this particular agent? And he said, well, the agent told me that if I ever pulled that moisture meter out again on their job, on their buyer's, inspection, that they wouldn't use them anymore, that they wouldn't recommend using them anymore. Guys, these are some of the things that we see in the industry that just makes me sick to my stomach. When we have people buying houses, I've interviewed inspectors on my podcast not that long ago, where the inspector actually said that during what they were calling walk and talk inspections, where the agent would just bring the inspector in, the buyer would pay for what was called a walk and talk, where they would just go through the house at the showing and point out things that could be problematic without having a full-blown inspection, because they didn't want to make that part of the contingency of the sale. And the agent walked through and said, where the inspector was saying, this is a potential problem, this is a cost, this is a big deal here, this is kind of like and the agent was behind them saying, don't worry about that, I got a guy. We're not going to ask for that. That's okay. It's not going to be that much. I got a guy. We can get this. Don't worry about it. This is happening out there. If you're buying a house, get a home inspection. Make sure that your home inspector is qualified, not that just took the course and passed the test and is following some guidebook of what they can say and what they can't say, and you're signing a contract that says they aren't liable. Be wary of when they tell you that they have warranties. These warranty companies, a lot of them are a complete joke. The inspector will tell you that they're backed by a warranty company, that if they miss something, well, guess what? In a lot of cases, there's an exclusion for it, and they will just simply say, have it evaluated by a licensed plumber, a licensed electrician, a licensed HVAC technician. Well, why not just hire them in the first place? If you're going through the house, you want an inspection, make sure that there's certain things that you dive into. These are the biggest costs that are costing people their house, that are putting them in default, okay? The roof is a major issue. Get a roof inspection. If your inspector is not going to climb up on the roof, they're going to use a drone. Have an inspector get a roofing company to check it out. They'll charge you a couple $100 most of the time. They'll get up on the roof. They'll tell you what you have. A lot of them will even provide a warranty that you can pay, that if something happens within a certain period of time, they'll come out and fix it for free. If there's a chimney, make sure you're getting chimney inspections. Lining chimneys cost thousands of dollars, $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 to line chimneys, depending on how bad they are, especially if it's a wood burning chimney. So you should have a chimney inspection. The other thing that you want to do is make sure that you get an HVAC inspection. Hire a qualified HVAC company that's your heating and air system in a house, and make sure that they look at things like the coil, the air conditioning coil. Your home inspectors are not going to take that apart. They're not going to dive into the coil, and very rarely are they going to tell you, what to expect with they'll tell you it's at the end of life. Well, guess what? If a heating and air system is older than 12 or 15 years, it's end of life. That's not the true story for that heating and air system. The other thing is get electrical inspection. One of the things that we know is that aluminum wiring is a problem in houses. That's why they eliminated it within the walls of the house. Houses have caught fire and burned down because of aluminum wiring. Now, there are things that you can do with adding copper pigtails in the device boxes and things like that. But make sure if you have an older house, get an electrician to come inspect that house, because here's the problem. Your circuits may be overloaded, and when you're, as simple as, you're in the bathroom blow drying your hair, and all of a sudden a circuit blows and 3 rooms are in the dark at 9:00 at night because you use your hair dryer. These are things that you can find out ahead of time by hiring an electrician to come and check out your house. So, the biggest advice I could tell you, know what you're buying. These are big commitments, expensive commitments, and, I want to make sure that you're covered. And that gets us down to number 1. We still will have some time to spare to answer some questions. But the number 1 biggest mistake that I've watched people make, not just over the last 4 years, but especially in the last 4 years, is buying a house with the wrong agent. Now, this always seems to get me into hot water with my agent peers, at least not the good agents. The good agents are going to tell you it's extremely important. And what we have seen happen over the last 4 years, 1.6 million licensees, more licensees in 2022 than we had houses for sale. Everybody and their brother and sister was getting their real estate license because of the potential money that they could earn in the frenzy, in the bubble. The problem is there are very few agents that will put their clients' needs over their own. In a commission-based environment, we always have to wonder what the motivation is behind the people that are serving or supposed to serve you in such a large purchase. So what happens is we find that most of these buyers, especially the first-time buyers, are hiring their friends that they went to college with, that they've met through other friends, and they're just not qualified yet to sell homes to people that are first-time buyers. And, the heat here is, what? You may not like to hear that. I come from an industry where you just can't wire a house. You can't just, put an air conditioning unit in a house. You have to go through the process and learn the business. And I think this is the biggest disservice that our industry has done. We've taken these licensees, the associations are paid on numbers, how many agents become licensed, and the brokerages get paid the same way because they charge fees to their agents. So the more agents, the more fees, the more money the brokerages make. Instead of making this a business to where we bring them into our brokerage, into our industry, and we nurture them, and we require them to work with other people. We require them to work under strict management. Some brokers do that, but a lot don't. And what happens is these folks are out there completely flying by the seat of their pants, and they have no idea what they're doing. They don't even know what the contracts are all about. They don't understand them. I had an agent one time. I was sitting in a conference room with one of our agents. It was right in the heat of the frenzy, and we had the listing. And I just happened to be listening to this phone call this agent was making, and the agent had submitted an escalation clause, meaning that their buyer would pay over the asking price of the house and up to a certain amount of money. The form was filled out completely wrong. They were actually harming their buyer by not filling it out wrong, because their buyer was telling them what they were willing to do, and the agent destroyed the escalation clause so badly that most agents would have just tossed that offer aside. But my agent actually called them and explained to them that they filled out the form wrong. This went on and on and on. There are so many buyers that lost houses or that lose houses because their agents don't present the offers right. They don't communicate right. They don't call people back. They suck. What we really need to do is clean this industry up, right? And I think that's going to happen because a lot of them are getting out of the business right now because sales are down. They're not making money. Now, if you want to serve people and you want to be in this industry and you're doing a good job, and if the shoe doesn't fit, don't wear it. But what I'm telling my buyers is this is the largest mistake I see people making over and over and over again. As a listing agent, I'm not going to defend you. If your agent sucks and is selling you, down the river. One of the things that I see right now that's going to bring us to a very current state here is that a lot of agents are overbidding for properties and they don't need to. This is the number one lesson. If you're representing a buyer, you should know that. If you haven't sold a house in 6 months, the market's shifted. It's changed. So what happens is they get you interested in this house in this certain neighborhood. They want to sell a house. They want to make the commission. Or what are they going to do? In a lot of cases, they're not going to get to the bottom of what you should be offering because they're not communicating properly. They don't know how to do it. They're not asking the right questions. They're not researching. And what happens is the house sells for an asking price, miraculously. I've been there myself. I've had listings personally over the last 6 months that I've sold that the buyers did not have to offer what they did. Now, I had no obligation to educate them, but I know what I had in offers. I know. I was a listing agent. So what's happening out there, it's not my job to school a buyer's agent when it's counterintuitive for me to do so with my seller that I owe my allegiance to put the most amount of money in their pocket as a listing agent. But as a buyer's agent, the table flips. Now I do have a requirement to save my buyers the most amount of money in their pocket. Guys, it's not being done the way that it should be in a lot of cases. So, here's the deal. We have to become more educated. The wrong answer is not using an agent, the wrong answer is to not hire an agent or use an agent. That's the wrong answer. We're looking at it wrong. What we should be looking at it is saying we need to hire the right agent. We need to hire the agent that earns their commission, that makes their commission, that you're not paying it. Well, how is that? We're negotiating for the best interest in our buyer. We're making sure that we get them the right price on the house, that we negotiate the repairs and the maintenance that should be done. All right, the best terms. And more importantly, we're advising them when they are making a mistake and that they should maybe consider walking away. I'm not going to tell a buyer don't buy a house. I'm not going to say that. But it is my job as a professional to give you my professional opinion. And guys, that's what we're not doing enough in this industry. Not all agents. Again, this is not all agents. The shoe fits, don't wear it. It's not my job to school you. as an agent. It's not my job. If you're here, we're going to hold you accountable, and I'm going to do my job in managing you. But it's not my job to teach, licensees, agents. It's their broker's job, their manager's job. But it is my job to advise you as my viewer that's sitting here watching my podcast of what you should be doing when you're getting ready to buy a house. So anyway, that wraps it up. That's number one. That's our top 10 list. I'm here for you guys. One of the biggest compliments you can do is reach out to me. There are several things. I do this, believe me. It's a commitment that I do because I want to help people. Ones that I can't help in my own brokerage. You're in different states. I'm only licensed in the state of Maryland. I have brokers all throughout the country that I feel good about. If you call, that they're gonna treat you well. I want to know about it if they don't, because they won't be part of our network anymore. But yeah, that's it. Do we have any more callers? All right, let's bring them in. JC. You with us, JC? Hello. All right. So JC is not with us. Let's take some questions. People wanted to know if I could get in on my top 10 and mistakes in 2 hours. We did it. Let's take some questions. Do agents know each other give hints on how much to bid, or does that not happen? Seems unethical, but I wonder if it happens. I'm sure it happens. Happens, I'm sure, all the time. Here's it's human nature. It shouldn't be any underhanded activity going on in any business. It should be above board. But we're dealing with humans, human nature. There's corruption, there's greed, there are, people that care, there are people that don't care, there are people that have the wrong motives in any business or service, and friendships. Does it happen? I'm sure it happens. What you should be doing in this industry is serving your client. You shouldn't be serving another agent. You shouldn't be giving. I've had it happen. I remember one time, I'll tell you the story. I was buying a house to rehab. This was during the crisis. And I'm going to tell you this. The prices were ridiculous here in Maryland. I could buy houses on the east side of town, Parkville, Essex, Dundalk, Middle River, Perry Hall, down in the city, Hamden, Remington. These areas that I rehabbed in. I've rehabbed in other areas too, but these were some of the heavier areas because this is the meat and potatoes of, affordability. And it was also where, unfortunately, a lot of our folks lost their homes. A lot of blue collar workers, lost their jobs, overextended themselves here in Maryland. And we have a lot of blue collar in Maryland. We have a lot of white collar, but we also have, a lot of blue collar workers. But anyway, this one house, I was buying houses for $40,000, $45,000, $50,000. Of course, rehab, they were selling for $250,000, really nice 2,000 square foot houses. A lot of the houses that I rehabbed and sold recently sold for $450,000, $500,000. I'm sure they didn't do anything to the houses. 10, 15 years ago, you didn't have to do anything to the houses if you sold them recently. Even though I'm sure some of them were showing distress. But I had this agent that I was trying to get a hold of, and it was a house, and I remember it specifically. And it was late in the day, 8 o'clock at night maybe, And I had been trying to get a hold of this agent because I had submitted an offer for $105,000 for the house. I'd submitted an offer. No response from the agent. Sent it days before, called, left a couple messages. 8:00 at night, I pick up the phone, I call the agent, and she, my hand to God, this is terrible. She said, my seller is old. I've told you, she never talked to me before. She said, I told you he needs a minimum of $85,000. That's what he needs. And I said, great. I'll give him $85,000. Now, I'd already sent an offer of $105,000. I said, I'll give him $85,000. That's what I bought it for. You know what she said to me? She said, hurry up. He's old. Get it to me before he dies. My hand to God. That's what this agent said. That's crazy. The conversations that happen out there that I've heard through the years gives me the foundation that I stand on to talk to you guys. I'm coming from years of experience, not as a licensee, but as a contractor. Now, I was a licensee back then. But I'm talking about the reason I got my license was because I didn't like real estate agents. Not all of them, but the ones that I was dealing with, I seemed to always run into the same problem. I couldn't get a hold of them. They were only concerned about the commission. When I help, I'm not patting myself on the back, it's just a fact. When I help rehabbers as my clients through the GFC, when investors were buying properties, I would go pick up supplies for them. I would show up through the rehab process, tell them what's hot, what's selling, what color to paint the walls, what light fixtures to use, what flooring to use, where to spend the money, where to not spend the money. This is a service. There are great agents out there that do these kinds of things. There's been polls that have been given that ask if they would use their agent, their real estate agent again. And I think it's a high percentage that said yes in the poll. Maybe it was 67%. This is a couple years ago. I'm referring to this buyer poll National Association of Realtors put out. But the problem was they didn't use their agent again because their agent was gone and never contacted them again, didn't keep in touch. Most great agents become like your best friends, your extended family, and they stick with you the whole time and help you continually over and over and over and over again. They're a resource for you when you need something or something breaks and you need a contractor or whatever it is. Other agents look at it and they don't have legitimate businesses. They just, it's on to the next transaction, on to the next transaction. We got what? 2 callers. All right. All right. Who we got? David?
What's up, Todd?
Hey, man. Hey, what's going on? Where are you calling from?
When they say, I don't know what I should bid, can you say, well, let's look at the numbers and let's go over them and look at the repairs and say, are you comfortable with that?
All right, slow down. Who's the buyer asking?
Their agent.
Their agent that they have a representation agreement with.
Right.
They should absolutely be working with them on what to offer or bid.
Right. But are you allowed to, instead of saying, I can't tell you, say, let's break the numbers down? And then,
oh my gosh. I think it's an agent's requirement to help them establish the purchase price or the offer price.
All right.
Yeah, it's a requirement. That's what else would you do? I mean, what are you there for? You know, you should be looking at comparable sales. You should be talking to the agent. You should be trying to gather as much information as you can. You should be strategizing with your buyer. You should be encouraging them on what to do and what not to do. I'm not going to make the decision for you, David, but I'm going to tell you what
Right.
my professional opinion is. That's what representation is.
Right.
That's why when I'm dealing with what I had said earlier as a customer, an unrepresented buyer or seller, the only thing I can't give a customer, which is what we call them in Maryland, I don't represent them. They're a customer. I can help facilitate the transaction for my client, but they're not my client. I can't give them professional advice or professional opinion. But my client, that's what that means. Being that fiduciary to them is absolutely telling them, I think we should offer them this.
All right. In Texas, they do both. And I bought some land years ago, and I looked at it. You can walk on it. It's got deer. Everybody loves deer and oak in Texas. And it had a modular home on it that was probably hadn't been lived in 10 or 15 years. I didn't really go into it, but you could tell from the outside it was falling apart. They only last about 30, 35 years tops, and they're done. And I was sitting there, and I went through one agent. He was a buyer seller, but he's generally going to lean towards the seller.
That's why I don't think that should be allowed.
Right.
That's the problem. That's a
got
transactional broker.
Yeah, they got me because it said it was listed at 20 acres. And then he went to do the paperwork, and he said, well, the actual deed is 21.3. And we took the price that I gave, divided it, and then bumped it up that 1.3 acres and got a little bit more out of it. But I also said, I'm not paying the fees. If they want it, they're going to pay the agent fees, and they're going to pay this. And I negotiated that, but I stuck to my price, give or take the difference of the acreage. So I think it was 42. I ended up paying 44 total, something like that.
Yeah.
And they paid for everything else. And now the property went up, and now they're going after people down. Everything going on in Texas. Mine property taxes didn't go up. I even have an exemption on mine. And I also stuck to another thing to negotiate is, well, that's got a modular home that needs to be removed out of there. And that's got it's on a trailer that's 50 feet long. That requires a semi to get out of there. And you're going to be talking $5,000 to $10,000, and it was buried in there. So you got to do this, that, that's going to cost me $20,000 to get rid of it. I'm not going to bump my price up.
Yeah.
And, everybody's like really concerned about the house. Still has that idea of the house has value. Look at an inflation calculator. If you bought a house 4 years ago at $450,000, if you don't have $500,000 back, $550,000, if you can't sell it for that amount, and you got to cover taxes and new agent fees and everything else, do the math. And we should be getting petitions together and petition the states and say, flip it. Or Illinois, you can go by the county and start petitioning to change things and go back the way it was. We used to tax the land. When we first started out, there was only one state that ever taxed the building.
Yeah, well, I think what they did was they gave a federal, allowance that if you profit as a single person $250,000, you can sell it and profit that tax free, or as a married couple $500,000. But what a lot of people don't realize is they, through the years, spend that money in keeping and maintaining their house.
Right.
And but anyway,
well,
look, man, we appreciate you calling in, David. Was there something else that you wanted to talk about there?
Well, I was going to say, if you look at the inflation, look at how many schools are hurting. If that house doesn't go up that amount, who else is hurting on that?
Yeah, well,
The government's
you're
not
probably
let-
talking about the recent interview that I did with Mitch, or
no.
yeah, no,
Well,
yeah,
kind
'cause
of that, but
yep,
the inflation, that if the house doesn't go up as fast as inflation does, the governments are trying to figure out where to get money from for their schools, and this is why school teachers haven't had raises in so long. And that's why we really need to get on. Like, I mean, you, first thing is education. When you get people that are willing to accept the education, next step is start getting the petitions together and start, petitioning to change back to the way they were.
got you, buddy. Well, that's good. We'll get those petitions going, man, and we appreciate you calling in, Dave. Thank you. Now we got is it Motor Realtor 1 coming up here? What's going on, brother?
Make sure my mic is turned on there.
How are you? Where are you
I'm
calling
doing
from?
good. I'm calling from Frederick, Maryland.
Oh man, you're close.
Yeah, we're close. I've been watching you for about a year and a half, something like that. I've been a realtor for it's coming up on 4 years now, and I have a little conundrum for you. I watch you and I promote you because you are a moral realtor, which my perception is maybe a rare thing in this industry, but I sleep well at night. All the deals I've ever done, although it's not a shit ton, is that I always sleep at night that everybody walks away from the table happy. So I have a conundrum right now. I'm dealing with a investment property up in Hagerstown, Maryland. Now, I found the buyers, investor buyers. I signed the sellers to a representation agreement. Now, how do you run ministerial duties? You personally yourself, how do you run ministerial duties to the buyer where you're doing all their contract work, but you still want this deal to work out?
Okay, so you represent the seller. You're the listing agent.
I represent the seller, and I'm doing contracts for the buyer. Now, we're under contract right now.
Mm-hmm.
But when they ask you questions like, what's the livable space and what is it zoned for? I find myself like, well, I would love to help out this investor that I connected to the deal, but ethically, I have to represent my seller as, fiduciary duties.
It's a multifamily property. You define commercial.
It was initially sold as a auction about 4 years ago. It was a laundromat.
Is it a residential
before.
Property?
It was a laundromat, but it has a residential property on site.
Okay.
With
maybe upstairs on top, first floor commercial.
No, it's multiple land and footage. Like, let's say 4,500 square feet livable footage, because they had a business there. They were washing laundry and producing it out the front of the building.
Is it zoned for commercial for a laundromat?
We don't. Maybe. Still.
So maybe it was grandfathered in, but maybe the
right. There's a lot of maybes.
It's non-conforming use, maybe. So what do you do? So a lot of times.
So what do you do as a professional?
Yeah. So in a commercial environment, a lot of times, if it is true commercial, you don't have the representation as you do in residential property. So there really is no agency. There's no agency in commercial.
It's currently zoned our residential use.
Right.
Currently.
So and the buyer's intention and the buyer's intentions will be what? Commercial or residential?
To turn it into residential.
To turn it to residential. In a multifamily residential, like a commercial residential?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Right. So, a lot of times in a situation like this, I mean, you got to be really careful, because if you give buyers the wrong information, so I would probably take the stance that all information to be verified, by the buyer. I would probably have encouraged the buyer to,
Right.
To get an agent.
But
That's what I would have done. I would have said, look,
right.
get an agent, get
Right.
representation, and
Absolutely.
but if they say, I don't want an agent, I want you to write it up, I would say, great. What do you want?
Right.
What do you want? What do you want to do? And then what I would do.
And there's the conundrum.
What I would do is, in your situation, is I would take that to the seller and say, the buyer has this list of questions they want answered. Provide them with the answers.
Right.
They could tell them, pound sand, go find out yourself, hire your own engineer, hire an architectural firm, whatever. But I would be really careful as to what information. I have to provide material facts, the exact square footage of a property. I'm not going to go and give you exact square footage to, you're going to have to do that yourself. Right. If the tax record says it's 1,600 square feet, that's what the tax record says. Verify it yourself. I'm going to be very careful.
That's what I said.
Because what happens is these buyers, unrepresented buyers, will suck you in. And the first thing they're going to do when it hits the
free
fan,
paperwork,
what they're going to do is they're going to blame you.
Absolutely.
They're going to blame you. So
Absolutely.
I think your radar is going up for a reason. You brought the buyers. That's okay. You said, hey, look, I got a property you may be interested in buying.
Right. But since the law changes.
I know what you do. I know what you do. You
but since the law
properties.
changes, you got to be really careful now. When it used to be a handshake and keys,
Yeah, I don't remember it ever being that, honestly. Never in my, because it's a very litigious business.
For sure.
Yes. And what happens is, people, they get offended and they will, you have to make sure, who do you represent in the case?
Right.
You represent the seller.
Sure.
I would present the seller with and say, look, I'm not going to measure all these rooms and be wrong on calculations.
But you could.
What do you want to do?
You're right.
What do you want to do? What do you want to tell them? What's the square foot? They want to know what the exact square footage is. Do you want to hire somebody to do
yourself?
that?
Yeah.
Or are you going to tell them to do it?
Right.
I would say, here's what I would say. If you were my seller, I'd say, look, I got an idea. We don't know whether this is legal to have a laundromat, a daycare center, a 15-unit building on it. Here's what I suggest. Why don't you counter them with, you'll accept their offer, give them a feasibility period to do all the research and all the study that they want for the next 30 days. And at the end of 30 days, they can say whether they want to buy the place or not. Kick it all
Very
over.
good. Very good.
I mean, that's what they're doing. They're buying it based on speculation, and they're trying to get you to tell them, whether it's allowed or not.
Right.
So,
right. So. Well, thank you very much, sir.
You got it,
I appreciate what you do.
Hey, man, you want to get a coffee one day? Let me know. We're close.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Or a beer.
We'll meet up. Thank you, sir.
Cheers.
All right, buddy.
All right. Nice. Let's take a couple questions before we sign off here. See what we got. See what Brother Joe will pull in here for us. Can a landlord terminate a lease at any time when a tenant hasn't done anything wrong? No. No. You can't just terminate a lease. I'm taking you're a tenant and the landlord's telling you that you're out on your feet. I'm not a lawyer, but I can tell you as a landlord myself, I think the answer is no. A lease is a lease of ownership rights. You're allowed, you can basically, you have quiet enjoyment. You're entitled, if the landlord passes away, the family can't come in and say, hey, the landlord passed away. You no longer have a lease. It survives. It's survivorship. It survives death of a landlord. Very few exceptions that I know of. Can the agent be with you and assist you during an inspection? I'm so glad. I actually forgot about this. I saw this one and I was going to pull it in. Thanks for pulling it up, Joe. My agent sat in the kitchen and read the newspaper. Look, there's a lot of agents that disagree with me on this. A lot of agents say, I'm not the inspector. Why do I need to be there? I'm not going to be there. A lot of agents don't even go to their buyer's home inspection, which just drives me nuts. I have an inspector that I like to use. I refer them to my buyers. Of course, I don't hire them, but when my buyers hire them, I'm happy because two guys, contractors, the one partner built houses for 20 years, but they send two inspectors to the job, to the property, and they split up and they get it done in a very time efficient manner. And a lot of agents, if they're doing a proper home inspection, it's a 3 or 4 hour ordeal. And that can be cut down by efficiency by having two great, competent inspectors. But the agent should be listening, gathering information, making sure that they're prompting the inspector to educate the buyer on things like, where's the filter? How often does it need to be changed? Where's the shutoff? Water shutoff? Where's the gas shutoff? What's the electrical panel look like? I want to hear those things from my client. They don't understand it, but I have more knowledge of it. Even as an agent that's not a contractor, I still have more knowledge as an agent selling houses, learning and paying attention myself. Because what's going to happen is when we get that inspection report, who's going to help the buyer walk through the process? If I know what is being said in that inspection, I may already be on the phone with a contractor saying, how much is this going to cost? When can you get over here and look at this if I get an extension on this inspection? This is one of the things that I hear agents more frequently than not say they don't want nothing to do with the home inspection process. In fact, I think a lot of agents are happy when their clients waive the home inspection because it's less time that they have to spend working on that deal. My gosh, what else do we do? I would have had a problem with that agent. I would have had to have told him to put the paper down. I'd have had to ask them why they're even there. I think you guys that follow me long enough know that I would. What is the key to selecting a good agent? At least 50% stink. You're being very nice, kind. How can you tell a good one? You could start with getting referrals. And a lot of people say, even as a contractor, they say, well, you're only going to give your good clients. You would be surprised the honesty of, an agent thinks that their client likes them. They think it was a good deal. They give you referrals. You call them up and they're like, honestly, I don't even know why they gave you my number because I went through this, this, and this. But you want to look at, how many houses they've sold, when the last time they sold a house, closed on a house, is it current? How familiar are they with the area that you're looking to buy or sell? Can they give you good information, good foundational information? Ask them questions like, how do you get a good deal? What are you seeing in the market right now? What are the trends that you're seeing? And ask yourself if you believe what they're saying. How are you going to represent me? How many buyers do you have currently that's in my price range? Am I competing with your own buyers? If two of you are looking in the same area, how could they represent you on the same property? They can't. Who does it go to? You have to ask a lot of questions. But I think you have to interview. And that's what we don't see enough of. Buyers are afraid to interview for some reason. Sellers interview. It's their money. They realize. They may like you, they may know you, but they're going to ask the neighborhood expert to come and have a look too. They may not tell you that they're doing it. They may say, hey, Todd, hey, look, I know you come highly recommended. You sold my friend so-and-so. You sold my friend's house. They may not say to me, but I'm also calling the neighborhood expert that sold 8 houses in the subdivision in the last 2 years in my direct neighborhood. They're going to call them up and get their opinion. Why don't buyers do that? Why don't buyers interview? I think they're afraid. I was a backup bid on a condo. The deal fell through. A home inspection was done 3 weeks ago. Seller is a friend of a relative and willing to share the report. Do I need to get my own inspection? If I'm the listing agent, I'm going to try and get you to accept my seller's prior inspection. I would probably look at the report, see what they found, and determine at that point, based on what's on the report, whether I want to trust it and ask for certain things to be fixed or not. I'm probably still going to want to have it inspected by somebody that, that I know or that I would trust. But I see buyers doing it all the time. I mean, if it's a good inspection company, it's a thorough inspection. They've listed everything out, including the kitchen sink. I might decide whether I want to proceed or not. And if I do want to proceed, I would probably get a backup inspection, at least to look at certain items on the inspection report. Does remodeling the interior of a home have any effect on increasing your property taxes when you go to refinance? Well, it depends on if the remodeling has to do anything with pulling permits if they're required, because that's how you alert the tax assessment or the tax assessor of the change in your property value. And I'm not telling you not to get permits, but that's how they know. When you go fill out a permit, if you're doing something that requires a permit, some counties, if it's not structural, there's no permit required. You're not doing an actual structural alteration. A lot of times not required. On some things, putting crown molding up, putting shoe molding up. But if you're renovating a kitchen, I pretty much can assure you you're going to need a permit. It involves electrical, plumbing, maybe even heating and air conditioning if you're moving ductwork around and things like that. So chances are, if you're doing a remodeling project, you will need a permit. Now, if you're just carpeting a house, you don't need a permit that I know of. Maybe your city or state's weird like that, and they want you to buy a permit to get carpeting replaced. Some counties don't even require you to pull permits to change the siding or windows in a house as long as you're not changing the size of the openings of the windows. But you have to verify it. The minute you pull permits, every permit application that I've ever seen, they're asking for a dollar figure of your improvement. Most people underestimate those, I would imagine. They're going to remodel their whole kitchen, but they're only going to spend $8,000. Well, what happens is the tax assessor becomes very interested in your project. They'll even knock on your door and want to come in and see it. I'm not saying do projects without permits, but that is what, really piques their interest in your property assessment. Charlton, I always appreciate you being on our Tuesday night podcast and really commenting on every video just about that I put out. Thank you so much. You've been following me for a very long time. I'm grateful. Todd, do you have a list of flood insurance companies, or do you leave the choice to the lender? So, I'm not an insurance agent, but I can tell you, I think the maximum policy, unless you go to high risk policies, very expensive policies, is $250,000. And that creates a major problem because a lot of people that are buying on the water, especially, are buying houses that are way over $250,000. But I had a insurance agent friend of mine. He had his own brokerage on not that long ago. I always refer my clients that need flood insurance to insurance agents or insurance brokerages to find out what their best options are, because it is a problem. You need to know if you're in a flood zone. And if you are, you know that you're only going to get so much coverage, which is going to limit the amount that a lender will allow you to borrow, which, if you don't have a lot of cash, can prevent you from buying that property. Or you have to go to very high risk, high cost insurance premiums. And that can change your whole affordability of your purchase, whether you can buy or not. So I always refer my clients to the experts that handle those types of questions. And, I frequently used my friend who had an insurance company. Now I use the company that he sold out to with all my insurance questions. But if you want, Charlton, if you send me an email, give me a little bit more description of your situation, I will call Scott for you and get you as much information as I can. So 2 more questions. Can you explain the difference between a facilitator, non-exclusive, and exclusive buyer's representation, please? I think that I have done this already, but I don't know when this question came in. But a facilitator or transaction broker would be somebody that represents the transaction. So they bring the buyer and seller together and they work with both to try and work out the details of the transaction, representing both sides, essentially. In Maryland, we're not allowed to do that. As a broker, I can be a dual agent. I can have a buyer's agent and appoint a seller's agent, or the other way around. And so long as they each hold their clients' information, negotiations in confidence until it's shared with the other side, they keep that level of separation. But an agency agreement, whether you're representing the buyer or the seller, means that you're fiduciary, you're serving and representing that buyer, to your point, and you do everything that you can to get them the best deal, the best terms, and advise them in your professional capacity. So is professional advice is the difference. But in those transactional states where the agent can represent both the buyer and seller as a dual agent, they're essentially saying that they can do that to both parties at the same time. It's just not true. You're going to be looking at getting the deal done in a lot of cases. Who are you showing favor to? In my opinion, it's impossible to not pick a side or the other when you want the deal to be done. I think that was 2. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining me on this Tuesday night podcast. As always, I'm exhausted, so I'm going to sign off. I love you guys. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please consider doing so now. Hit that alert bell. You'll know every time we upload content. You're about to hear more from us. One of the things I want to talk to you about is a lot of you are on social media. You can cruise on over to our Instagram, our TikTok, our X, LinkedIn. No matter where you want to follow us on social media, we're there, and we are going to be picking up the pace on our posts, and it's going to be exclusive to each platform, so that, why a lot of people just regurgitate the same thing on Instagram and TikTok. We want to give you something fresh. So we're working on some new content for you on these platforms. We'd love for you to follow us. And we're also on every audio podcast platform, the major ones: Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, Apple, Google. So if you want to turn us on while you're driving down the road or on the elliptical or the treadmill or on your bike, we'd love for you to follow us on one of those audio channels as well. And the biggest compliment that you can give me, guys, is sharing us with your family and friends so that we can continue to build the most amazing online community See you next time.